What's going on, guys? It's Jack, and today we're talking Baylor basketball. And until we get to the start of the season, I'm going to be previewing a team per day. So if you have your favorite team, drop it in the comments below. Now, before we get into Baylor moving into the 2024-25 season, it's important to look back at last year, where Coach Scott Drew led Baylor to a 24-11 record. They were 11-2 in the non-conference, 11-7 in conference play. They went 1-1 in the Big 12 tourney, where they lost to Iowa State, and they went 1-1 in the NCAA tournament, where they lost to Clemson in what was an upset game that Baylor was favored to win, and they just didn't really get going in that one. Clemson played well. I think more than anything, Clemson played really well. And so now Scott Drew is entering his 22nd season, maybe 23rd season. I could be off by one there with Baylor. And I did not know this until I was working on the prep for this video that, Scott Drew took over this program in 2003. And I knew he had built this program up, but I had no idea how bad it was before he got there. They had one NCAA tournament appearance in 50 plus years until he started in 2003. And then obviously you guys know how good this Baylor program has been in the past, easily the past 10 years or so. And then I would say in the past 5 years, they've become like a perennial power in college basketball. And last season, was a good year. They did have the number 2 offense on KenPom, but they had a mediocre defense. They were like 107th. So you can see that was an area that they struggled with last year. So let's get into the roster. Who's gone, who's back, and who's new with Baylor basketball? So Jacoby Walter, he left, NBA draft first round pick. So did Yves Missi, first round pick. And Jalen Bridges was picked up as an undrafted free agent by the Phoenix Suns. By the way, I like that pickup by the Suns. I think Bridges has NBA potential. Ray J. Dennis, their point guard, pass first guy, he's gone. Muro Little, he's gone. Caleb Lohner actually transferred to Utah to play football. And Jonathan Chachua, I may have butchered that. I apologize. He's also gone. He was a guy who stuck around at Baylor for a few years but had a lot of injuries, and so more of like a veteran presence in the locker room last season than anything else. But the first 4 guys, right, Walter, Missi, Bridges, Dennis, those guys were starters, and those are big shoes to fill with this year's Baylor team. But who's back? Jaden Nunn is back. Langston Love is back. Those 2 guys were double-figure scorers for Baylor last year. Really good players, important players to get back. Josh Ojanwuna, potentially. He's back. And Giannis Ndanjga is also back. I'm doing terrible with these names. I apologize, guys. But I think Ojanwuna is going to be a very intriguing player for Baylor this season. And we're going to get into the reason why I think so in just a couple minutes. But with that said, you've got those 4 guys, really the first 3, and then you could argue the first 2, right? Those 2 guys were key rotation players. Ojanwuna he played in the rotation, but he wasn't quite as important with Missi being there last year. He looks to be more important this season. But with that being said, I think it's important to address who's new with Baylor, and that's going to be Norchad Omier, Jeremy Roach, Jalen Celestine. And those are your transfers. And then your 3 freshmen, your impact freshmen, who were on 24/7 Sports, BJ Edgecombe, Rob Wright, and Jason Asamoah. So, starting back at the top with the transfers. The first 2 I know very well. I'm an ACC basketball guy. And so Norchad Omier and Jeremy Roach are very familiar to me. Omier is a guy who, ever since he got to Miami, I've been very impressed with. He has got a really high motor. He plays the right way. He can pass as a big. He is undersized as a center. He's like 6'7", but he's also not undersized for a center. The guy's like 240 and just absolutely ripped. And so he can move guys around and use his like lower center of gravity to his advantage. And then Jeremy Roach is a guy who played 4 years at Duke, started the last couple of years at Duke, took a really big leap, I would argue, last year where he was healthier. I think that helped, but his shooting and his decision making, I think, both really improved last season at Duke. And if he can bring that improved three-point shot with him to Baylor, that's going to make a big difference for this team in 2024-25. Jalen Celestine, played on a decent Cal team, much better than Cal teams of the past couple of years, and averaged a little less than 10 points per game, but is 6'7" and shot 44% from three, and that's going to be important for Baylor this year, both his height and the three-point shooting. And then the freshman, VJ Edgecombe. He's the prize of this class. I think he's going to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft in 2025. He was the number 5 rated recruit. I just think he looked amazing with Bahamas. Like, I just think this guy has a chance to really take off this year. And then Rob Wright, I liked his game. Saw a little bit of him on the high school scene. And he's a small guard, so I'm not sure. I think he'll be in the rotation. He's good enough to be in the rotation, but we'll get into the reason why. I'm not sure how many minutes he's going to get into in just a moment. And then Jason Asamoah, he's a 6'7" wing, ranked around 75 in the class, so that height is going to be important because the rotation for Baylor, as we get into it here, I think is going to be good, but a bit undersized. And the way I had it when I was looking at who I thought would start, who would be a part of the rotation for Baylor, I was kind of debating. Do I think Coach Drew is going to go with the taller players and kind of have some of his better players come off the bench? Or is he just going to start his best players? And obviously Coach Drew knows much more about what he's doing than I do, and much more about basketball. But what I thought, for what it's worth, is I think Jeremy Roach is going to start alongside Jaden Nunn and Langston Love in the backcourt. So you have 3 guards. And then I've got VJ Edgecombe as a wing. I could certainly, if you want to say he's a guard, he's 6'5", so I wouldn't challenge you there. And then Norchad Omier, I think, is going to start at center. So no one taller than 6'7". I think Jeremy Roach listed at 6'2" is probably a little bit generous. So it's a very small team. With that being said, though, Roach, Nunn, and Love all shot above 40% from 3 last season. So really good shooters. And even Omier was at 35% at the center spot. Edgecombe, I think, is more of a slasher, but I could certainly see him shooting around 35% from 3. And then off the bench, no particular order, but I think these 4 guys will be part of the rotation. Josh Ojamuna, Jalen Celestine, Rob Wright, and Jason Asamoah. Asamoah maybe not, but I think the first 3 for sure. Ojamuna is going to be really important to give them size and defensive presence, because I'm not sure if Omier can play as a power forward, but you'd want to have a different option when you come off the bench to give you some more rim protection that Omier doesn't really provide. And then Jalen Celestine is a bigger wing, 6'7", so he's just as tall as Omier. And he can, as I said earlier, he can really shoot it, and that's going to be important for Baylor. And Rob Wright is a smaller guard, but I like his game, so I think he'll be part of the rotation. Now, what I was saying earlier in terms of the minutes, that's going to be, kind of up in flux, because I'm sure Coach Drew is going to try to get some of the taller players into the rotation. But I think, honestly, he might be forced to play these smaller guards more often because they're the better players on the team. So, moving into the schedule and predictions here for Baylor. I don't have all of their non-conference games yet. It's kind of crazy to me. It's September and their full schedule's not out, but at least from what I saw. If you guys saw anything, drop it in the comments below. Also, if you're enjoying this video, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like. It helps us grow. So, non-conference. We've got Gonzaga, St. John's, and either Virginia or Tennessee. The St. John's, Virginia, or Tennessee is part of a mini tournament in Bahamas. and they'll play a game at UConn. So you've got 4 tough non-conference games from what we can tell. And in conference play, they've got home and away games with Arizona, Utah, TCU, Houston, and Cincinnati. So immediately, the home and aways with Houston and Arizona jump out to me. But I also think Cincinnati is going to be better this season. Then only at home, they'll play Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Central Florida, and West Virginia, while they'll go on the road to take on Arizona State, BYU, Colorado, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. So the Big 12 and the SEC, as far as I'm concerned, are the 2 toughest conferences in college basketball. It's going to be a tough road for Baylor this year, but with that being said, this is a veteran team. Like Roach, O'Meara, Langston Love, Jaden Nunn, these guys have been around. They are very experienced. They know the college game. And I think they're going to have a good year. I really do. I think they're going to go 9-2 in the non-conference. I think they'll split these games, these challenging games, and then they'll win the rest of their non-conference games. And then I think they're going to do pretty well in conference play. Despite their lack of size, I think they can make up for their lack of size with speed and shooting. And so I think they're going to go 14-6 in conference play, which will give them a regular season record of 23-8. So with that being said, guys, I'm curious, what do you guys think about Baylor this season? Let me know in the comments below. What do you agree with what I said? What do you disagree with? Love talking college basketball, so let me know in the comments below. And tell a friend about the channel. Like I said before, trying to grow as much as we can so we can do this full time. See you next time. Peace.